So, today I thought I would talk about facing fear or facing demons, facing the things that we're afraid to face, looking at the things we're afraid to look at. This is a subject I really like because I realise up until the age of 32 probably, well, no, 28, maybe younger than that, mid-20s, up to my mid-20s, I allowed my fears to keep me trapped. So the things that I was afraid of change. Most people are afraid of change. I was afraid of confrontation. I was afraid of spiders in the bath. I was afraid of dentists. I was afraid of confronting my wife and standing up for myself. I was afraid of discomfort, really. And I didn't realise that, every time I moved away from discomfort, every time I tried to avoid discomfort, every time I ignored discomfort, every time I denied discomfort, that discomfort just grew. So to me it felt like a Frankenstein, like a monster. That's what the book Frankenstein is about. It's about somebody that creates a monster and then denies the monster, and the monster keeps chasing them all the way through the story. We do that ourselves. We create our own monsters in our own mind with our very powerful imagination, and then we spend a lot of time running away from our monsters and saying, isn't it a terrible world? Isn't the world violent? Isn't the world ugly? Isn't the world greedy? Isn't the world envious? We do this all the time. They're our own monsters. Just recently I had a play on called Fragile. I know I've spoken about this before, and Fragile was really me looking at all the monsters that were inside me: the greed, the anger, the massive oceans of rage, the jealousy, the psychotic jealousy, the sexual self-harm, the physical self-harm, the judgment, the kind of core belief that the world was intrinsically bad or the world was intrinsically dangerous. That was about me writing that down in the form of a play and getting an actor and a production to put it out so I could actually look at the story. I could look at what's real and what's actual. So that was based on me being sexually abused when I was a boy, and the act of the sexual abuse told me implicitly that nobody could be trusted, not even those you love, especially those you love. So that was the core belief that was placed on my hard drive by this teacher that abused me. And then somebody else in my life that I loved suggested that I'd led this guy on. And there's a great line in the play, or there's a great part in the play where the character's talking to this, his mum. He's talking to her and he's saying, what do you mean led him on? I was 11, I was fucking 11, I was a boy, I was a fucking boy. And I love that scene. I love that scene because it's the character. Obviously the play is partly based on truth and partly based on fiction, but the character is tracing it right the way back to try and find out what's true and what's not. He doesn't know anymore. He doesn't know what's true. Did he lead him on? Then he's thinking, how could I lead him on? I was 11. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea about sex. No, not even kissed a girl up until that point. And then somebody who can't deal with the trauma of their, one of their family members being sexually assaulted, and I can't deal with the idea of confronting this. Kind of says, well, it probably was your own fault. It's probably that you led him on. So the idea of the play was me looking at all of these fears, massive. I had massive fear. Even putting the play on was tremendously fearful, mostly because I was worried about upsetting my family, specifically upsetting my mum, because it's such a harsh play. I was more afraid of upsetting my mum than I was of people threatening to kill me when I was on the door. It was more terrifying. But I wanted to look at this monster. I wanted to look at what it was I was afraid of. What is it that I'm afraid of? Well, what's the truth? Where's the story? What's the truth? So me writing this play and this play unfolding and watching this production enabled me to see the actual essence of my fear. And there's a 40-year story around it, but the essence of my fear and the truth of the actual story was one person terrified me by sexually abusing me. and implicitly telling me that nobody could be trusted, not even those you love, especially those you love. And another person suggested that was my fault, neither of which was true. So the world can be trusted. You don't need to trust anybody else. I don't need to trust anybody. I don't need to trust you. I don't need to trust my wife. I don't need to trust my son. I don't need to trust my family. I just need to trust me. If I can trust me, the rest of I can find equanimity in anything. So that's what it taught me. It taught me that, well, the biggest thing it taught me was that the monster that had been chasing me for 40 years, the Frankenstein that had been pursuing me, that was getting bigger as I was getting older, wasn't actually a monster. It was a 11, 12-year-old boy who was saying, you've forgotten me, acknowledge me, recognize me, listen to me. I want to talk. I want to tell you this story. I want to talk about my fears. I'm terrified. Me writing the play enabled me to go past the story, and the story is based around how many people can't be trusted and how dark the world is, which wasn't true. It was based around the fact that nobody can be trusted, which wasn't true. It was based around the fact that God abandoned me, my mum abandoned me, my dad abandoned me, my family abandoned me, this man abandoned me, none of which was true. It's just one incident that happened that left a stain on my on the hard drive of my mind. That's what happened. When I got to that, I was able to see that the man that abused me was ill, misdirected. He needed his day in court. He should have gone to prison. He ended up killing himself, as it turned out. I forgave him, so I was able to untangle myself from that. I let myself completely exorcise this man from my mind and from my body. So I was able to look at the essence of it and think, one of the people was ill, the other person was scared, and God can't abandon me. Like no more than a fish can be abandoned by water. I am God. God's in me. God's all around me. God's outside of me. God's inside of me. God's before me. He's behind me. He's above me. He's below me. He's whatever God is. I have no fucking idea what he is. Only that I feel him. Whatever he is in me. My soul or my Atman or my authentic self is connected to the super soul. It's connected to everything. The Bibles tell me that, but I don't need the Bibles to tell me that, because I know it, I feel it. It's something I've experienced. It's something that I experience every single day. In fact, I had a conversation with God in one of my written kind of monologues, and I said, God said to me in the written monologue, you think that I abandoned you. And I said, I think you did abandon me. And he said, I didn't abandon you. Did you abandon you? I didn't abandon you, but did you abandon you? And then of course I realised that I did. A part of me did abandon me. I couldn't cope with the situation. I couldn't cope with what happened to me. So part of me abandoned me. In Freudism, I think they call this abandonment of the child. It's a part of ourselves that can't cope. It jumps out of the body. It can't cope with the situation. So it kind of abandons the situation. And then over the top of that, I built layers and layers of warrior, layers of army, layers of tattoo, layers of skill, so I could go out and defend myself against this violent world, which didn't actually exist other than in my mind. But because it existed in my mind, it existed. So what I learned from that was that when I wrote the play and when I put the play on, and I put it on in Coventry so all my family could watch. So this is me saying, this is all the things I'm ashamed of. This is all the things that I'm afraid of. This is all the things that blackmail me. I want you to look at them because I'm going to stop them blackmailing me. I want to look at them. I want to bring them to light. When I put it on in Coventry, everybody was protected, and I had a massive expansion. My awareness expanded, and I suddenly felt unconditional love for all the people involved. I felt massive compassion for the person that abused me. He ended up hanging himself in a hotel room in London. He ended up wasting his incarnation. I felt compassion and unconditional love for all my family, who I'd felt before they had abandoned me or didn't understand. And I felt massive love and understanding for myself. There was a massive expansion of awareness. And then recently, I mean, of course, looking back at my life, all of my expansions of awareness have come from that same place. They've come from exactly the same place. When I went and taught in America for Chuck Norris, there was a massive amount of fear. Who am I? Who am I to go and teach for Chuck Norris? They've invited me over 3 times now. I've been over twice and taught for them. But who am I to go and teach for Chuck Norris? I'm just some snotty Coventry kid. And there was a tremendous amount of fear, even to the point that when they said, will you come over? I said, yeah, but it's going to cost this much. I put in a price that was too high. It's a price that they wouldn't pay. I wanted to take a Yuki over with me, so they needed to pay for my Yuki, and then I needed to be put up in a hotel. I needed X amount a day. I did that to sabotage myself because I was too afraid to go. But when I did go, because I recognised that it was something I needed to face, something that I needed to step up in, I needed to accept the responsibility and accept this privilege, and it was a privilege. Afterwards, I experienced a massive expansion of awareness again, a huge expansion of awareness. In fact, it put me onto the world stage. I suddenly become aware of all of the other things that I could achieve. It was a huge expansion. When I published my first book, exactly the same. Very afraid to write, very afraid to stand on and be a city on a hill, very afraid to be different, very afraid to step out from the factory, very afraid to step out from the working class roots, very afraid to look pretentious, very afraid to think that people might think I'd think more of myself. Lots of fear, but I published the book. I published the book despite the fear. I published the book because of the fear, because I wanted to confront the fear. I wanted to observe the part of me that was afraid. And when I published the book, huge awareness, a huge expansion of awareness. Because I've been told all my life that people like us don't write books. Ordinary people do not become artists. Ordinary people do not do wonderful, special, extraordinary things. But actually they do. None of that's true. And when I published the book, when my book was published, when somebody published it for me, I suddenly thought, if that's not true, if it's not, what I've been told isn't true, then what else isn't true? So I wrote 40 books, I wrote 5 plays, I wrote 6 films. Well, about 15 films I've written, not all of them have been made yet. I did stage plays, I did journalism, I even wrote for the Times, because I knew I could. My awareness expanded. I suddenly became aware of every potentiality, or of a lot more potentialities, and I went on to explore that. So the point I'm trying to make, and it's something that's just been underlined because I've just been reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the big Hindu epic. It's about 18 books, it's 12 cantos, 18,000 verses. I took 2 weeks off work to read it, and in the 10th canto, which is 4 books long, they talk about the birth of Krishna as a human, and I was really intrigued that when Krishna was born, and if you think of Krishna as the birth of Krishna consciousness, or the birth of Christ consciousness, or the birth of universal consciousness, or the initiation of an epiphany, a moment of clarity. If you imagine you have a moment of clarity and you suddenly become very aware of everything, that we could class that as the birth of Krishna. So the 4 books, those specific books, are about the adventures of Krishna. What I loved about it was the fact that when Krishna was born, the king at the time, a guy called King Kamsa, suddenly became aware that because Krishna had been born, his death was imminent, his death was inevitable, his death was definite. And I looked at it, and again, I wouldn't say this is anybody else's interpretations. What it said to me was that the king represented the ego, the egoic self, and the egoic projections, like the people around us, the conditioning that we're in. So when Krishna was born, Kamsa was afraid, and he sent about 10 demons, one after the other, to kill Krishna. And what I loved about this was the fact that each time they sent a demon to kill Krishna, or again, if you want to think about it just as consciousness, each time the ego tried to kill the Krishna consciousness, and Krishna faced the demon and fought the demon, embraced the demon, intercourse with the demon obviously inevitably died, because it was like a fly flying into a fire. It was like approaching or taking on the whole universe. Each time Krishna killed one of the demons, he liberated the object of fear. So the demon was liberated, and the effulgence, the energy that was trapped inside the fear, the energy that was inside the fear, jumped out and came across to Krishna. So Krishna expanded. So with each fear, with each demon that he faced, he expanded. What it said very succinctly, very clearly, very evidently, is that when you face your fear, when you face your demon, not only do you liberate the object of your fear, so when I wrote the play, the object of my fear was liberated. Those parts of me that were afraid suddenly were gone. But you also get all the energy that's trapped in it. So lots of our energy, lots of our power is locked inside our addictions, locked inside our fears, locked inside our shame. And when we face them, or when we intercourse them, when we kind of go to war with them sometimes, we get all that power back. This is something that it says in the Kabbalah. When we kill our addictions, we release all our power. Our power is locked into our addictions. So I love the idea that, and it's been very true of my life. Every time I've embraced a fear, every time I've faced a fear, every time I've gone to war with a fear, every time I've given love to a fear, or just noticed a fear, just brought a fear to light, just wrote a fear down on a piece of paper. Every time I've done that, I've had a massive expansion of energy. So when I write, it's about me writing down my fears, how I live. You know, I have been accused before of, which is quite amusing. I've been accused of not wanting to step outside my comfort zone. I don't know what the fuck a comfort zone is. I've not been in one for the last 20 years. I've never been inside a comfort zone. I'm outside of it all the time because I want to know more. I want to grow. I want to understand. So there's two things that I got from that. One, when you become aware, when you have an epiphany, when Krishna or Christ consciousness is born within you, it will be attacked. Be in no doubt about that. When I first published my book, I was attacked by lots of people. Lots of people didn't like the fact that suddenly Geoff Thompson, the floor sweeper, Geoff Thompson, the doorman, had become a published author. So a lot of people didn't like it. And if you're aware of watching, you know, if you watch the social media, you probably see that that's happened to me over the last 20 years in magazines and on the social media. You see these demonic entities come out and attack. They're attacking Krishna consciousness or attacking Christ consciousness because they are egoic identities that feel threatened by divinity. And as your divinity grows and expands, these old parts, if you die, they fall away. They can't exist. They can't exist in that stratosphere. So when we face our fears, when we face our demons, when we turn into them, when we intercourse with them, when we embrace them, just like in what was the film, The Matrix, when the character faces the agent at the end. Can't even remember the character's name. Anyway, he faces the agent at the end, and the agent represents the egoic kind of sub-personality, the demonic, the fear. When he encounters him at the end, what does he do? He runs into him. He intercourses with him. He completely embodies him. And when he embodies him, he destroys the demonic or the egoic entity. So I suppose what I'm trying to say, if I can be more succinct, is that when we face our fear, the nature of the fear is liberated, and we get the energy that's locked in that fear is given back to us. I'm struggling to articulate this, please forgive me. When we face our fear, the energy that is inherent in the fear, the effulgence, comes out and is given to us. So we liberate the nature of the fear, and the energy that is in the fear comes to us. So that's why Rumi said we should hunt down our fears. We should go out and be night travellers. That's why Francis was asked to kiss the leper, because the energy, the expansion is within the fear. So it's just something I'm encouraging people to do, to look at where you're afraid and recognise that that's your treasure. As Ken Wilber said, you know, if you've got pain, if you've got fear, if you've got addiction, you are sitting on a treasure. When you lean into that sharp edge, when you embrace it, when you intercourse with it, the energy will be released you'll get the energy, it'll become to you. That's the gift, that's the treasure. There will be an expansion of awareness, and the object of the fear will also be liberated, which I really like. I really like that. That's why normally if I've got anything in my life, this is something Paulo Coelho says, when there's fear in his life, he turns into it very quickly. He doesn't let it get too big, he embraces it, and he releases the energy that's in it. There's a great book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and he talks a lot about a specific technique to dissolve these pain bodies, as he calls them. So that's encouragement enough to go out and hunt your fears, or when the fears are in your life, embrace your fears. Change your perception of your fear. Recognize that your fear, your demon, your angst is a treasure trove. You just need to completely embrace it, and when you do, all that energy will be yours, and you'll have a massive expansion of awareness, and suddenly you'll be able to look around and see more potentiality, and each time you face a fear, you'll be able to see more potentiality again.